जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम ज़ैनब।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम सर।
क्या हाल है ज़ैनब, खैरियत से हो? ठीक ठाक हैं?
जी सर।
Any updates from your school so far about reopening?
सर 7th को इन्होंने कहा है कि पता चलेगा आप कंफर्म।
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम राबिया। चलिए जी
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
जी वालेकुम सलाम। कैसे हैं राबिया, खैरियत से हैं?
जी सर अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह।
चलिए जी, okay. All right, so I think without any further ado, let's begin. Acha ji, I have three things on my plate today for our lesson. The first thing is we will talk about the neurons. The second thing is we are going to talk about something that you are quite familiar with already back from O levels, that is reflex arc. And number three, we are going to talk about resting membrane potential, which is a very important topic. That's the major part of what we are planning to do today. Okay. Chalaji, so let's begin. Quickly, just to give you an overview of what we did yesterday. Basically, we started off with the syllabus for the aapse. The main thing that we did yesterday basically was the comparison of the hormonal and the nervous system in terms of the following 9 differences. And then we also saw some similarities in the past paper questions, okay? And then we went on to discuss some past paper questions. और हमने अपनी बात ख़त्म की थी. We finished off basically discussing the general idea about the neurons, okay? And just to give you a very quick big picture again, we are basically looking at the nervous system, okay? Which we know is composed of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, okay? Central nervous system is further composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system includes the neurons, which are to and from the CNS. Okay, basically जो कि तीन हैं, the sensory, the relay, and the motor. So basically, we are going to begin with the following today, that's the neurons. And we are going to go into details today. जो detail आपने O levels में नहीं देखी. Well, some people they actually went into details of that in O levels, but this is basically what we are planning to look at. So what I'm going to do is, there are, I mean, you don't really need to know much about the relay neuron because you know, it just connects the sensory and the motor. What you need to know is basically the differences, the general features of a neuron itself, and then the slight differences you have between the motor and the sensory neuron. Okay, you have full-fledged questions in the past papers that deal with this idea, inshallah, that we will talk about anyway. So let's first talk about the motor neuron. ये देखें, यहाँ पे जो आपको picture नजर आ रही है, this picture is a picture from your own textbook, and this is a typical motor neuron, how a motor neuron would look like. Okay, so We are going to list some features that we need to know and we need to understand. Again, generally, you know this idea that, so let me label this as the motor neuron. Okay. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is this is a cell, okay? And a cell will typically have something. Lekin, generally speaking, if you come to the right-hand side of what we, on the right-hand side of the board, what we did yesterday was, generally speaking, आप दो parts में divide कर सकते हैं neuron. You have the cell body, okay? And then you have the either of the fibers, either the dendron या फिर axon. So basically the cell body and the fibers. That's the two main essential things basically that you have in a neuron. So the first thing, let me write down here in points. So the first thing we need to know is that the nucleus is in the cell body. ठीक है? ये जो पूरी चीज है जिस पे मैं dotted line लगा रहा हूँ, इस पूरी चीज को हम cell body कहते हैं. Okay, that this entire thing is known as the cell body. So the nucleus is within the cell body. Okay. अच्छा, थोड़ा सा आप location समझने की कोशिश करें. Of course, both of these structures need to be understood in comparison. I mean, look at this diagram. Here you can clearly see the motor neuron. And here you can clearly see the sensory neuron. I want you to compare the positioning of the cell bodies, okay? In the motor neuron, if you look at the cell body, okay, and therefore the nucleus, you can clearly see that for the motor neuron, nucleus jo hai, it is basically, is it somewhere in the center? Ya phir, do you think it is, it is somewhere on one side? The nucleus is usually, or the cell body is at one end. Okay, that's important with regards to its orientation. Okay, and then यहाँ पे show नहीं किया हुआ उन्होंने, मैं draw कर देता हूँ. In the cell body, you actually have lots and lots of mitochondria. Okay, because the passage of nerve impulse is a process that is energy driven, and inshallah we will look at that, how that's the case. So the cell body has many nuclei, many mitochondria in the cell body. Many mitochondria in cell body. Okay. Achha. Uske baad, there is also a lot of, so all of what I'm talking about at the moment basically deals with the cell body of the neuron. So my cell body heading there, that's just easy to remember. Okay. So, and also there is a lot of RER in the cell body. Can you think of why there is a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum in the cell body? What do you think would be the consequences of having a lot of RER in the cell body? What is the function of RER? Rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is topic 1. Yes. Ji, Rabia, any guesses? Zainab, any guesses? No? Okay, Hamas, any idea? Why there's more RER? बच्चों मेरी आवाज आ रही है आपको?
Yes, sir. Ari. Sir.
What does rough endoplasmic reticulum? देखिए, rough endoplasmic reticulum has a lot of ribosomes. It's the site for protein synthesis. So a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum is signifying a lot of proteins being made. Okay, and why do we need a lot of proteins being made in the neuron? Inshallah, we're going to look at that when we look at resting membrane potential, because all along the membrane you have different types of proteins basically that are there. ठीक है जी. और एक और स्ट्रक्चर भी होता है सेल बॉडी में, उसको हम कहते हैं निसल्स granules. These are granules. You really don't need to go into the functions of this. Your mark scheme में उसने दिया हुआ है, इसलिए मैं आपके यहाँ mention कर रहा हूँ. I'll talk about its function maybe later, but just take note of this. That is as far as the cell body is concerned. Now, let's look at the fiber part, okay? So let's talk about the fibers now. Now, if you look at the dendrons, well, technically they don't have dendrons. They have dendrites, okay? They have dendrites. So dendrites, they lead dendrites lead to the cell body. Lekin kya matlab? I mean, that's obviously understood, right? So if that's the direction of the nerve impulse. So these things are the dendrites, and they basically lead to the cell body, which eventually leads towards the axon. Acha, ab yahan pe ek aur baat yaad rakhein. All of this that I'm encircling, all of this, these are dendrites, okay? These that I'm encircling with red in color, they are not dendrites, okay? So there's an exam tip, if you like, that I want you to remember at this point, and that is, okay, dendrites are not at both ends. Dendrites not at both ends of the neuron. दूसरे end पे जहाँ पे axon, I mean, ये जो मैंने जिनको red color से encircle किया है, these are known as the synaptic nodes, okay? These are known as the synaptic nodes, okay? And they are at the end furthest away from the cell body. And inshallah, we're going to talk about their function once we talk about the synapse, okay? So let me write that point here. ये जो ends हैं इनको हम कहते हैं, they are known as synaptic nodes. Synaptic nodes, okay? And they are at the furthest at the end, furthest away, furthest from the cell body. Okay? All right. इसके अलावा बच्चों, अभी good so far? Come on, give me a yes or a no. Both of you girls. It's complete silence from you today.
Yes, sir.
चलें. Okay, synaptic nodes. चलें. उसके बाद, let's talk about the other fiber. Now, what is the other fiber? The other fiber is a long axon. The other fiber is a long axon. ठीक है जी? All right. It's a long axon. लेकिन अब आप मजे की बात देखें, इसका जो axon है, I mean, all of what I'm highlighting with yellow, all of this is axon. But there's something really interesting on the structure of axon, and that is the presence of something which is known as a Schwann cell. Schwann cell kya hai? Well, we need to go into some structural details to understand this thing. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move to another diagram. Okay, that should make more sense. Ye dekhen ji zara. I want you to look at this diagram. By the way, this diagram, the left diagram is from your own textbook. This is given on page number 332. Page 332. देखिए, ये जो बीच में है, this diagram, by the way, is a transverse section of an axon. Okay, so this thing in the middle is the axon, or literally ये जो इसके ऊपर, it looks like a squid, honestly. It's basically a cell जो कि literally it is wrapping itself around the axon. Okay, and you call this cell, इसको आपने O levels में myelin sheath के नाम से देखा था. Myelin sheath भी इसको हम कह देते हैं, लेकिन it's basically a living cell, and it literally wraps itself around the axon. You must be thinking of this just like the podocytes. लेकिन podocytes तो बेचारे जरा इस तरह they surround the cells of the Bowman's capsule that there are spaces in between. लेकिन यहाँ पे they are literally wrapping around in such a way that you can see this particular diagram. Let me show you another diagram that will basically reinforce this idea. Insert pictures, files. ओके ये वाली डायग्राम ये देखिए जी इसको मैं इसको यहीं पे रख देते हैं इस वाली डायग्राम को हम साइड पे रखते हैं ये देखिए so let me make this bigger now again this is another diagram ये जो पिंक वाली चीज आपको बीच में नजर आ रही है ये एक्सॉन है और ये जो माइलिन शीट जो इंसुलेटिंग लेयर जो आपने पढ़ी थी वो लेवल्स में वो असल में इट्स बेसिकली अ सेल दैट इज लिटरली सराउंडिंग जस्ट लाइक जिस तरह वो रोल पट्टी नहीं होती आई मीन ऑनेस्टली थिंक ऑफ दिस जस्ट लाइक अ रोल पट्टी यू नो rolling around the axon. So that's basically what a Schwann cell is. A Schwann cell is is basically rolling itself all along the surface of the axon. लेकिन आप देखें कि Schwann यहाँ पे ये एक Schwann cell दिखाया हुआ है फिर ये then this is the second one, that's the third, that's the fourth. So it's not one single Schwann cell that is surrounding the entire length of the axon. Okay, it's different. So you can see that there are spaces in between the Schwann cells which don't have any myelination, as in myelin sheath. Schwann cell को हम myelin sheath भी कह देते हैं, so I'm using the word interchangeably. Let me slash it with myelin. Okay, just myelin or myelin sheath should do. माइलिन की स्पेलिंग मैंने गलत लिख दी है ठहरो स्पेलिंग जरा सही कर लेते हैं लेट्स नॉट बी बैड एट स्पेलिंग्स this is Myelin. Okay, so these gaps in between are known as the node of Ranvier. ये नाम किसने रखे हैं मुझे नहीं पता लेकिन बहरहाल these are the names that have been coined. Okay, so now let's quickly count the number of points that we've done so far. Number 1 nucleus, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8. Number 9 is the Schwann cell. Number 10 is the node of Ranvier. Okay, what exactly is node of Ranvier? It's basically the point on the axon where you don't have any Schwann cell basically surrounding. Okay, so ये 10 points हैं which basically relate to the structure of a motor neuron. Now, what is the function of a motor neuron? अगर मैं आपसे पूछूं, what is the function of motor neuron? What would your answer be? Yes, Zainab, what do you think? आप कल के notes देख सकती हैं. I have no issues, inshallah. Go back to your notes. Look at what the function of a motor neuron is supposed to be.
So to carry nerve impulses.
ठीक है, carry nerve impulses. अच्छा, from the central nervous system to the effector. अच्छा, लेकिन अब याद रखें, अब now you are actually going to transition from the word nerve impulse also. You have to use the word action potential. So there is action potential traveling along the length of the motor neuron. So basically, it's the same thing as the nerve impulse. Like a nerve impulse is again now a simpler word that we want to replace with action potential. Okay, we want to replace with action potential. Now, this is generally what we need to know about the motor neuron. If I do the same for sensory neuron, there's a slight difference that we need to understand. So I'm gonna slash it here. यहाँ पे मैं ये देखें यहाँ पे मैं आपको देता हूँ picture of a sensory neuron. You can just give me 1 second. I think this picture should do. Okay, now again this picture left side पे आपको okay, Wait. Okay. चलिए
सर आपने एक लिखा हुआ है TRER, ये T से क्या बनता है?
TRER नहीं है, इट्स RER, रफ एंडोप्लाज्मिक रेटिकुलम। वो TR नहीं है, वो एरो। Oh my goodness, I honestly have no idea कि बच्चे इतना ज़्यादा में ये arrow ज़्यादा का मतलब है they are more RER, it's not T, the arrow is signifying more, okay, you understand? अच्छा जी, now I want you
यस
to
सर।
look
सर आगे जो आगे सर वो जो ग्रेन्यूल्स हैं वो
कि उसके बारे में I haven't talked about detail, उनकी डिटेल क्या है वो हम बाद में देखेंगे, वो मार्क्स स्कीम में क्योंकि उन्होंने एक पॉइंट दिया होता है तो इसलिए मैंने लिख दिया है। I'm going to talk about them later, don't get over worried about that. Now if we talk about the sensory neuron, then how is sensory neuron different from the points of the motor neuron? देखिए बाकी सारे points जो common है वो तो हैं, like for example the nucleus, okay, it's within the cell body, okay, the nucleus is within the cell body, lekin, and then of course many mitochondria, again that's common. I'm rewriting that since this is important, aap mere sath likh lein, many mitochondria, and then again many rough endoplasmic reticulum, again for the same reason that they have to manufacture many proteins, ya phir aap many ribosomes bhi likh sakte hain, that should also do, many ribosomes, okay. All right, and then so all of this is within the cell body. Now, with regards to the, again, they have the Schwann cells, yeah, myelin sheath. मेरे spellings बहुत गलत हो जाते हैं कभी-कभी, I apologize for that. Schwann cells, okay, they have them, and then of course they do also have nodes of Ranvier, ठीक है जी, nodes of Ranvier भी होते हैं, okay. And then what is different? I'm going to write the difference with another color, let's say red color. They have long dendrons. How do we know? Look at this diagram. Look at this diagram. This diagram. देखें, ये वाला ये गलत इन्होंने लेबल किया हुआ है, axon नहीं है. If this is the direction of the nerve impulse, then this should be the axon. Okay, so they have lobic. Their cell body is actually somewhere, not exactly in the middle, लेकिन ये है कि it's not at one end. Okay, so they have long and dendrons, and they have short axons. So this is basically a stark difference between both the sensory and the motor neurons. Otherwise, everything tends to be almost the same. Okay. अच्छा जी, ये एक table है which is signifying some features, okay, and some differences. So with regards to features, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 features for both motor and sensory. So let's look at these differences. Number 1, position of cell body. Motor neuron को मैंने आपको बताया at one end of the cell, and for sensory, it is part way along the axon. Location of the cell body, ये हम इंशाल्लाह पढ़ते हैं अभी when we do the spinal cord. It's gray matter of the CNS, and sensory is the dorsal root ganglion. Inshallah, when we do the spinal reflex action, inshallah that should be clarified. And then you have direction of impulse. It's from CNS to the effector. It's CNS to the effector. Again, we'll talk about this. And function is motor neuron stimulates the muscle to contract, basically the effector, and sensory transmits information, well, the nerve impulse, from the external to the central nervous system. Yeah, आपको इंशाल्लाह notes में मिल जाएगा table, so you don't need to get worried about that. Okay, this is a very good diagram. ये कल picture के ऊपर मेरे से गलती से ये syllabus का आ गया था, so just ignore this part. I just want you to look at this side of the diagram. This is given again on page number 332 of your own textbook. देखें, ये जो पूरी circular सी चीज आपको नजर आ रही है, ये it's okay. Before I pinpoint that, I want you to, मैं इनमें से एक सर्कल को रेड शेड कर रहा हूँ, ये देखें, एक ये सर्कल है और कुछ और सर्कल्स भी हैं जिनको मैं ग्रीन शेड करने लगा हूँ. ये वाला है, ये वाला है, and you have this one. Can you see and tell me the difference between the circles that I have colored as red and the ones that I have colored as maybe green? क्या ख्याल है? What is the difference, do you think?
The difference between lumen.
ठीक है, ल्यूमेन के अलावा और भी बताएं. ल्यूमेन तो है ही है, ल्यूमेन से इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता. I mean, look
Sir,
at
the
these.
myelin sheath.
Excellent. So, I mean, you can see dark circles around the ones that I have colored as red. And so basically, these are axons, okay? This is a transfer section of a nerve. Ye nerve isliye hai because it is a bundle. You can see this is a bundle of neurons. And you call the bundle of neurons as a nerve. So this diagram is a photomicrograph, a transfer section of a nerve, and you can see axons of sensory and motor neuron in the cross section. और ये जो मोटा वाला dark area आपको नजर आ रहा है, this dark area is basically representing the myelin. Okay, it's representing the myelin. All right, so I mean, and there's some that you can see that they are not surrounded by myelin. Maybe because this cross section is cutting them at the node of Ranvier, for example, जहाँ पे myelin नहीं है, या कुछ non-myelinated neurons भी होते हैं. अब myelin का क्या function है, ये हम आगे detail में देखेंगे, लेकिन just to give you an idea, it basically speeds up the nerve, the speed of the nerve impulse. I mean, वो already काफी speed में होती है, but generally it tends to increase the nerve impulse. Okay. चलिए जी आगे चलते हैं. Okay. All right. So now the next thing that we're going to talk about is basically a reflex action. कुछ याद है आपको O levels में से क्या था reflex action? Zainab, Rabia, and G. Anything you remember? What was reflex action? I mean, anything, and it's okay if it's nothing that you remember.
रिफ्लेक्स सेक्शन है कि जिस इसमें जो मोटर न्यूरॉन का फंक्शन है या मूवमेंट है वो रिक्वायर नहीं करता कि जो सिग्नल है वो सीएनएस पे जाए.
देखें, it's an सबसे पहले it's an involuntary response, ठीक है जी, to a specific stimulus. आपने किसी गरम चीज को हाथ लगा लिया, इस्त्री को हाथ लग गया, तवे को हाथ लग गया, and you pull your hand away without even realizing. You realize afterwards once your hand is pulled away. So it's an involuntary response to a specific stimulus without conscious control. Without conscious control. यानी कि आपका ब्रेन वाला पोर्शन एज सच इसमें इन्वॉल्व नहीं हो रहा. अब आप देखें कि बेसिकली you know, if you were to look at this and try and understand how this entire thing works, I'm gonna इस diagram पे अगर आप देखें मैं label करता हूँ. Let's try and understand the positioning of the sensory and the relay and the motor neurons, okay? Because that's really important. Okay. Now you can see यहाँ पे किसी pinpointed object, for example, touch key, that generates, that's basically a stimulus for pain. So you know you have pain receptors in the skin. यहाँ पे impulse generate होती है. अच्छा, ये impulse generate होती है pain की form में, लेकिन ये pain से convert होती है into nerve impulse. This conversion is a separate topic which is known as transduction. Transduction simply means that you're going from pain to nerve impulse. How exactly does that happen? Well, inshallah, we're going to look at this topic later. Lekin yahan pe pain impulse generate hui hai, which is being converted into the nerve impulse, and then it is carried by the sensory neuron. So the sensory neuron is taking the nerve impulse from the receptor to the central nervous system. Okay? लेकिन अब यहाँ पे अगर आप गौर से एक चीज को देखें तो आप देख रहे हैं कि you know, you can clearly see that, okay, I think I should, मैं यहाँ पे इसको जरा redraw करूँगा because I need to draw the cross section of the spinal cord first, and then I need to put in all of the neurons. So I would strongly encourage if you draw that with me also. Inshallah बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है. Picture वैसे मैं आपको दे दूँगा, अगर आपने नहीं draw करना, that's perfectly fine. लेकिन this is just to reiterate this. Okay, so I begin with something like thick incognito. Okay. All right, so something like this. Okay, so basically this is how a typical spinal cord would look like. अच्छा यहाँ पे एक थोड़ा सा misconception भी clarify करना ज़रूरी है, and that is, you know, what exactly is the spinal cord? I mean, usually I've seen students getting confused with the backbone and the spinal cord. Do you think they're the same, the backbone and the spinal cord? Yeah, are they different? क्या ख्याल है बच्चों? Are they the same or are they different? What do you think? Girls, can I have some input, please?
Different, sir.
क्या different है? देखिए, ये मैं आपके सामने एक picture रखने लगा हूँ. That should clarify this idea. Slightly above. नहीं, ऊपर तो जगह नहीं है, नीचे रखना चाहिए. ये देखें, look at this diagram. You can clearly see that, I mean, this is the backbone. That's the typical backbone. और ये basically आपकी backbone है. और backbone के बिल्कुल अंदर वाली side पे, you have this spinal cord literally being protected. Okay, it looks something like this. Let me show you another picture that will reinforce this idea. Where did that picture go? Where did that picture go? Yep, here it is. Okay. अच्छा, इस पे बाकी खौफनाक लेबल्स हैं, उसको आप फिलहाल इग्नोर करें, लेकिन मैं जो आपको दिखाना चाह रहा हूँ वो ये है. This is the backbone. ठीक है, और ये बैकबोन के बिल्कुल पीछे देखें ऊपर, ये सारा एरिया जिसको मैं हाईलाइट करने लगा हूँ, I'm highlighting as yellow. All of this is the spinal cord. You understand? So it's different from the backbone, you know. So basically, and please ignore all of the other labels. I'm just going to cross them out just to make sure that we don't get overwhelmed by all of these labels. Okay. So just relax. We don't need to know them. It's just that we're concerned with the spinal cord. Okay. अच्छा जी, अब ये spinal cord का आपको cross section नजर आ रहा है. Okay. So you all, what you can see, I have drawn this portion that I'm encircling, that you can see, and yes, exactly, that's the cross section basically. And this is what you can see that I have drawn. Now we need to understand the positions of all of the three neurons. देखिए, ये spinal cord है. This is the spinal cord, we understand, and by definition and by categorization, spinal cord is part of the CNS. What's the time? Okay, it's 8:02. I think let's take our traditional 1 minute break. For some break with जाते हैं, because again this topic requires some attention, and then we will exactly resume after 1 minute. I'm ending the session. Please, let's go rejoin. Please don't become lazy. Go and stretch your legs, have a glass of water, and then come back. I want you to be fresh.